Welcome back to another episode of Just Stories with BT. This is season 2, focusing and highlighting female executives in underrepresented markets, especially the mattress and furniture market. So this week is doubly exciting because we have Susan Walvius, who is the co-founder and co-CEO of Sheex. So welcome, Susan, to the show.
Thank you, Brett.
I'm really excited about this episode because I feel like your background is unmatched. the path you took to then get in this industry is very interesting. So I'm excited to hear about it because I don't know how that part happened. So I can't wait to talk about that. But before we do, I want to introduce the listeners to you. So I'm going to do a little brief introduction and then you tell me what I missed and what were the things that you need to fill in the gaps on. Sound good?
Sounds good.
Awesome. Okay. So everybody, this is co-CEO of Sheex Performance Bedding, Susan Walvius, in 30 seconds or less. That'll be my attempt. Okay. So she was born in Fairfax, Virginia. She grew up in Northern Virginia in a small town called Woodbridge. Her hobbies included playing football with the boys and obviously basketball, which we'll get into. Her first job was at Sonny's Ice Cream and Barbecue. You heard that right? Ice cream and barbecue. Like, how is this not a combination that I've heard of before? This is wonderful. So I'm gonna ask you about that in a minute. In high school, she was obviously big into basketball, so much so that she was an All-American. That led her into going into West Virginia University, where she was also an All-American in basketball. So that was a huge part of her life. As she got out of college, she transitioned eventually into coaching, where she took over as the women's head coach of Western University. And then after a few years, parlayed that into taking over the USC women's basketball head coaching job from 1997 to 2008. Where she ideated and started, hey, what's a smooth transition from basketball? Oh yeah, we'll get into sheets and apparel. So then she transitioned into starting Sheex in 2008. As the business was growing, a big kind of launching point for them was that they got into all the Bed Bath & Beyonds in 2015, really put them on the map. In 2018, they got into direct TV. 2018, they got into direct TV. So got in front of a lot of people. And then they've been growing, getting people to understand performance bedding. And then during the pandemic, she got a wonderful pandemic pup named Buck. And then she just told me she's back in the office in New Jersey, which is great. Things are opening back up, travel's back up. And now here you are on Just Stories with BT podcast.
Well, super cool to be here. Really great.
Awesome. So first off, explain to me ice cream and barbecue under one roof. How's this work?
Well, I was 13 years old. I wanted to wear branded clothes. I think it was Izod that I wanted. And my parents said, no, you want expensive clothes, you need to get a job. So I started working at 13, got my first tip serving a table, even though it was kind of a takeout place. And you could eat all the food you wanted. It was all you could eat. It was great learning experience. Very cool to get your first paycheck.
Yes, absolutely. I'm just going through that now with my son. He's almost 13 and he, we live in Southern California and he's a big skater and surfer. And so the style for the skaters now is back to wearing these big baggy pants, which is what I did in 1990 when I was a skater, 92, and I wore big baggy pants. And I always thought to myself, I'll never be one of these dads that, if that's the cool style, go for it, but here I am, I'm like trying to explain to him, you look so dumb. Like these pants look awful. And he's like, I want these bigger ones. And I was finally like, you know what? Then you're paying for them with your own money that you've been saving up. And he's like, fine, I'll pay for them. And sure enough, he bought his own pants. So I was like, you know what? Whatever. You do what you're going to do.
I love that. I've always very
I can imagine that I, at least for me anyways, I think I would leave that place with a stomach ache every single time.
Yeah, probably not a good nutritious diet for an athlete. But no. I did get my eyes on shirts.
Yeah. So you go to West Virginia. You're an All-American there.
Went to Virginia Tech.
Virginia Tech. Sorry, I got that wrong. Virginia Tech, All-American there. How did you get from that to coaching? What was the in-between gap there?
Well, I never wanted to coach, which was really interesting. I wanted to go into business. I wanted to get into really more home development, planned communities, which is what my dad did, and why I went to Virginia Tech. But my assistant coach at Virginia Tech took a head coaching job at Bradley University very late. And it was too late for her to go out and find an assistant. And she said, Susan, will you just come? And I still had another biology class I had to finish to graduate. But she asked me if I'd be her assistant coach, if I'd be interested in doing that. And I was like, well, how hard can that be? That's like getting paid to be on vacation. So I did. And I went out to Bradley as an assistant coach, and I was there for 3 years. And then I decided I was going to go back in and work for my dad's company. And I made a lot of money, and I was able to buy all the clothes. I went out and I bought a Jaguar, but I was really unhappy, so I realized at that point that money isn't going to make me happy, that I really enjoyed helping athletes be successful. So I got a call from the head coach at the University of Rhode Island, and she had just taken the job. And after being out of basketball for a year, I went to be an assistant coach at the University of Rhode Island. Loved it there. It's a great place to live. But a head coaching job in Virginia came available. So I'd been an assistant coach for 4 years, and I applied for the job at VCU, Virginia Commonwealth University in Richmond. And I was the youngest Division I head coach in the country at 24 years old.
Wow.
Which was, I sat at my desk the first day and I was like, well, what do I do now? It was kind of a crazy learning on the job, which is certainly what we've done at Sheex. But I was there for 5 years. I got a call from West Virginia University, and I went out to West Virginia, and I was there for 2 years. And we rebuilt the VCU program. We rebuilt the West Virginia program. And then I was recruited to take the job at South Carolina. And so
South Carolina. I thought it was USC.
Yeah, well, it's the other USC. It's the East Coast USC. So then I was the head coach at the University of South Carolina for 10 years. And I always wanted to coach in the SEC. I had rebuilt the program there. We took the team to the Elite Eight. We missed the Final Four by just a few baskets, and but it was a great experience. And while at USC, I fell in love with a particular fabric, and it was we were a Nike team at that time. Mm-hmm. Fell in love with a particular fabric. I went to school with Kevin Plank, who founded Under Armour. I went to school with his older brother, and he and I were buddies. And so I watched his little punky brother create this big brand in Under Armour. And I was amazed by that, how you could do that and go up against the Nikes of the world, not really understanding how competitive the industry was in general. But then fell in love with a particular fabric. It was actually a Nike dry fit, super silky, soft fabric. And I said, oh, I want bedding made out of this stuff. And I went online to buy it. And nobody was making performance fabric bedding, which didn't make sense to me. After getting into it, I understood why. But that's where the idea came from. And the thing that I knew about from coaching is building a team, and how important that team is. And success or leadership to me from coaching, as I said before, it's about helping people be successful. It's not about leading by demanding things. It is about having expectations, communicating clear goals, but it's about helping people be successful and building the right team. So I could go on and on, Brett, so just cut me off.
No, I'm just so interested because I think that, what I love about that, and that this is such a fabric that's woven into all these podcasts with all these successful people, is that, so many times it comes down to these different relationships, that you make in these different random places. And, I always tell my team and my kids, we always talk about the way you treat people and the way you, at all times, but especially, when you're leaving a job or what, because you just never know, how that's going to come back around, and I love the idea that, here you went to school with this guy, his younger brother, all these relationships. I love how they play out. So for those people out there who may not know of Sheex, can you give us give us the 60, 90-second kind of rundown on, what it is, why it's special, why it's different?
Well, Sheex, it's spelled S-H-E-E-X. So there's an X at the end, like in Spanx. And that was part of the inspiration, looking at what Sarah Blakely did. But what Sheex are, if you think about your athletic your athletic wear. If you're going golfing today, you're wearing a performance fabric shirt, or you're just going to sweat in cotton, because cotton really absorbs moisture. And so we did a lot of testing. Most bedding was created to be insulating. Our bedding was actually created to breathe, wick moisture, and keep you cooler, which is a better sleep environment for better quality sleep. So that was the idea. And then looking at the space in general, and you and I talked about this before we got started, I didn't see a lot of brands in the space. And I thought this could be really, really cool to do what Kevin Plank did, but do it in the bedding industry and create a brand that's really meaningful, that stands for something, that does something unique, that performs and functions. Everything we build in the company functions. So it started with bed sheets. We were able to patent the idea. I mentioned earlier that we understood why it wasn't done when we got into it. And when you're dealing with these super soft circular knit fabrics, there are width restrictions in those fabrics. And our fabrics stretch, and that's also, it's very different to have a sheet that stretches, but it's super easy to make the bed, and it fits deep mattresses and works great with adjustable base beds. But we had to come up with a manufacturing process to make our product that we were able to get patents all over the world on, which that was a learning experience. We've successfully defended those patents on 3 separate occasions, which was great. Nobody thought that this could be a patentable idea, but it is, or it was, and now it's we have a very unique product to offer as a company.
That's awesome. I had you probably would have no idea on this, but so years ago, I was overseeing all of the mattress and sleep category for living spaces. So we called it Revive. And I don't know who on your team, but someone on your team was trying to sell, get Sheex at living spaces. And so they asked for, my information or whatever. And before a market, I got sent this box, and I opened it up, and it's like this cool black box and Sheex on top. I'm like, what's this? And I opened it up, and there was like the tablet inside, and it started playing the video, like full on pitching me through video, and had the fabrics. And I honestly, I was blown away. And I went to market, and I went to the appointment, even though I knew I couldn't buy it, because unfortunately, living spaces at the time had a vendor restriction. Like literally, I could only have 6 vendors total. So they were like, well, if you pick anyone up, you have to drop someone. And I was hamstrung. So I'd tell people, hey, I can't buy, but I felt so compelled to go because I was like, this thing is amazing. So whose idea was that?
Well, that was my idea, but I stole the idea actually from a marketing company that sent me a video book. And I said, this is a perfect invitation. It'll be unique. And so we went out and we searched for them. We created it. You can tell your story there. You can personally invite people. You can change the content. And as soon as you open it, the video starts, which I thought was really, really cool. So we've done several of those. It's definitely unique, and you can demonstrate the product that way.
Yeah.
You can show your showroom that way, but I love the video invites, and then shipping the fabric in the box and all that.
No, it was brilliant. So well played. So before we get into some more questions on Sheex and kind of how you did it all, I really like to give the listeners a chance to get to know you a little bit, and I usually try to do that through, the art of storytelling and some stories. And so, in your career, or even, coaching, Sheex, school, whatever it is, like, is there a story that you love to tell that's funny or entertaining that always brings a good memory out?
Well, when we first, as I said, not being a business major, when Michelle and I first got into the business and we were trying to hire people, because it is about team, I was reading a US business magazine. It was, I don't know which one it was, but it was reading a magazine, and there was a whole article on the best headhunters. And so I thought, well, we'll just go get headhunters, we didn't really even have a business yet. So we called up a guy named Bob Damon, and he was the president of North America for Korn Ferry. And his assistant saying, who are you? What's your company? Basically after a long period of trying to get a meeting with Bob Damon, he had hired, in this magazine reading about him, he had hired everybody at Under Armour. And so I was like, that's perfect. He can help us build this team. So Michelle and I fly out to Beverly Hills from the East Coast. We go into his office, we meet with them, and he was like, well, what do you guys need? And we were like, we need a CFO. And he's like, well, how much money have you raised? And at that time it was like 145,000, something like that. I mean, we were really truly just starting out, and he laughed in our face. I mean, he spent all this time with us. He's asked us, he was a really personable guy. He's the chairman of our board today, which is funny. But he laughed in our face, and he was like, "You don't need a CFO." He's like, "You can't even afford to walk in the door here." And so we'd flown out to his big Beverly Hills office, and he ended up, end of the conversation, he ended up investing in our company. He ended up bringing in investors to the company. He's still the chairman of our board today. And he's a great, great guy. And he's been a part of our journey now, feels like a part of our family. But it was, he absolutely just laughed at us. And that was a special, there have been many, many crazy stories.
No, I love that though, but I love, obviously the pitch must have been compelling, even though he was like, "Hey, you don't need that. What you need is money."
Yeah, exactly.
That is awesome. So throughout your time, at Sheex specifically, do you have any stories around challenges or failure that, you came up against, and kind of how you, persevered and got to where you guys are today?
Well, when we first went to Bed Bath & Beyond to try to sell them, and it was 2015, we took let me start backwards. When we first started the business, we took the idea to Bed Bath & Beyond, and they loved it. They didn't want to test. They wanted to roll into 600 doors at an end cap. We had, as I said, $145,000 in the bank, something like that. So how are we going to, and we were manufacturing in the US at that time. So our price point was much higher, and we have a premium price point now. So we went to Li & Fung. Li & Fung is one of the world's largest sourcing companies. Li & Fung's got an interesting business model because they're made up of small companies that they've acquired. So we go to Li & Fung and see if they would have an interest in licensing the brand for this Bed Bath opportunity. And they did. And a guy named David Greenstein, who was one of their small businesses that they had acquired, led their home division. And he was one of the best salespeople I've ever met as the president of that company. And he got us, they sourced our product. We had to help them understand how to manufacture, but they managed the business. We were a licensed brand. But when David left, they went through 2 president changes. One came from an accessories in a purse business, and they really didn't have the relationships. 2 president changes. They were sitting on their hands. They stopped working the business. And we took the licenses back. But that was a really challenging time period to go through when somebody's licensing your brand. And we licensed to other companies too at that time. And we took all the licenses back and built our back-end ops team and began running the business ourselves. So, but we were able to build it, learn, understand what the consumers liked, what they didn't like, as we evolved on the back of Li & Fung, which was great.
What was the most challenging part of that? Like when you took those licensing back and had to figure out how to do it all yourself, what was the hardest part, do you think?
Well, I talk about building team, and the thing about, I could tell you what skills I need in a point guard, what skills I need in a 2 guard. I can go and evaluate that talent. In business, again, we thought we needed a CFO, and we had $145,000 in the bank. So it shows you how little we knew about what those teammates should actually look like. But when we took the business back, and it's why we're located in Marlton, New Jersey, we had to build out the back-end ops team, which we had nobody in ops. So we were, at that time, Cindy DiPietrantonio, who was the former COO at Jones Apparel Group, they were acquired by a venture capital company. And we'd met Cindy at one of the Fortune 500 things. And she was like, "Oh, you guys are going to have a cult following. This is so cool. I love it." She was an advisor for us for a long time. She stepped in and hired the Jones Apparel people that had been let go with that transaction. So that's why we're located in Marlton, New Jersey, because that Jones office was located in Bristol, Pennsylvania. And, so they all knew each other, and it was pretty much a seamless. Cindy came in and helped run that ops group for a period of time for us as a president. And that really helped us transition. But systems, IT, ERP systems, that was really challenging because they're costly. Everything's a bolt on, it takes a long time
Yeah.
to get those things set up. So, that part was a learning process, expensive and frustrating.
Yeah, I bet. And what about on the flip side of that? What about success? What's a story you can tell around, maybe one of the first times that you were like, wow, like
There
we're
have
actually
been
having success.
many wow days, but and I still have them, which is fun. It's exciting.
Yeah.
But the one that I remember the most is watching, the Bed Bath and Beyond sales when we first launched on those end caps, because it wasn't a test. It was like, this is it, either it goes or it doesn't, and we're going to know very, very quickly. So, and it was a huge success. When we first launched at Bed Bath, they allowed us to launch with the video. We like video, right?
Yeah.
So it allowed us to launch with the video on the end cap. But we were the most productive per square foot in their sheet department, for the first 2 years that we were there. So that was cool because we had a small team. And we were located in Columbia, South Carolina at that time. And we had a lot of interns that were students from South Carolina. And one of those interns still works with us today, Chris White, who you may have met. He's gone from being an intern to he doesn't lead our sales team, but he manages our sales team, which he does a great job for us. So he's been with us a long time. But that was a big moment. Seeing those sales, knowing we had a hit, and being able to, build on that.
Yeah, that's so exciting. I can imagine, just getting the first few, being able to see the reports or however you got the information the first few times must have just been amazing.
Yeah. And, it's been a learn by trial and error for us. We've grown through people. We've made a lot of mistakes along the way. One of the books that I read called Traction by Gino Wickman, I think, has been really helpful for me. When I read that book, I wish I'd read it a long time ago as an entrepreneur starting a business, because it was all the mistakes that are laid out in the book, or all the mistakes that we made. It was like reading about ourselves. And but he talks about focusing on the next 90 days and the big things that need to get done. And because he uses an analogy that I like, which is like, if you have a glass and then you have a pile of rocks and you have a pile of sand, and you need to fit them all in to that glass, which represents a period of time. If you put the sand in first, all the little tasks, those big things never get done. But if you focus on the big things and get those big things done, then you put your task in and your sand, that's how you get it all done. And that was a great analogy. But there's also a lot of process in that book that was very helpful, is addressing issues with your leadership team and communication, and dashboards and things like that are helpful. But I thought that was a really good book, and I read that maybe 2 years ago, and we started implementing that entrepreneurial operating system.
I love that. Yeah, it's a great philosophy, and I've actually seen that demo live I was at a retreat once, and I can't remember who the speaker was, but he did that. He had a big jar, and then, he filled up the rocks, and then he could pour the sand in, it filled all the gaps, and it like went with his speech. Great visual though. I was like, oh, I get it. I totally get it. So tell me, what in your experience, like getting Sheex to the size it is now, and, in all these different places, from your leadership style as a co-CEO, what did you take from coaching basketball that transitioned into your role as a CEO?
I think the biggest thing is helping people grow and get better, and empathy, which is really important, really knowing people first and what their personal objectives are, who they want to be, how they interact, and coaching people differently. There are people that need to be pushed and challenged a little bit more, and other people just need to be encouraged and recognized for what they're doing well. It's one of the things in coaching that is really important. Coaching is actually giving criticism. You're encouraging, but you're also criticizing to get people better. And it's so important to recognize what people do well. and that's people really, really, you got to have that balance of, I really like what you're doing here. This is great, and then at the same time being able to, we call it build a sandwich. Michelle and I do, which is you're doing this well. Here's the meat of what I want to talk to you about, and then you're doing this well. So you're building, you're opening you're opening the ears for the criticism and communication.
I love that. I I heard a speaker one time who explained, his coaching philosophy in the use of these 4 pennies. So he used to say when he was in sales, he would start the day with 4 pennies in his right pocket, and he would try to give someone a bunch of, hey, you're doing great here, you're doing this really good. And every time he'd give them kind of a compliment, talk about what they're doing right, he'd switch a penny from the right pocket to the left. Mm-hmm. And he said, my goal was to try to get all the pennies to the left side before I gave some real criticism, because he found that once he had done that, they were very open to listening. Whereas if the first thing of the day was the criticism, they were much more, there was a lot more of this, and they weren't as open to it. And I actually really like that. I was like, yeah, it's a great philosophy, because you see now too, and I don't know if you're seeing this in your business, I'm sure you are, but generationally too, the way you approach people, the way you talk, all of that's changing and evolving, consistently. And so if you think, you can talk to your 50 or 60-year-old employee the same you talk to your 20-year-old employee, I got newsflash for you. It's not going to be a very good conversation. And you have to understand how to adapt those conversations, and it's such a big part of, that's why I'm such a big fan of emotional intelligence, especially the 2.0 book and the whole process, because you start understanding, like the way you're being interpreted and the way other people are is such an important part in business. Those dynamics are just crucial, especially in your, leadership teams and your executive teams.
Well, one of the things, Brett, that was really challenging for Michelle, and Michelle was an All-American, my co-founder. She was an All-American, played 13 years USA basketball. I mean, she was a national high school player of the year when she came out, played at Tennessee, won a national championship, MVP of the national championship team. Where she really struggled, and she was my assistant coach, and we were working together when I came up with this crazy idea. It's when you're in sports, you yell. I mean, there's a level of you're yelling, and you're very direct in your communication. You're yelling at people when you don't like something, and there's less time for processing. You have all that planning and preparation. But when you're in the moment, when you're in a practice, when you're in games, you're giving very on the spot, direct, sometimes stern, communication, run faster, whatever, or get on the line, you're running. And you have, penalties for when things don't happen. Well, Michelle really had a difficult time with the HR aspect and she doesn't yell at people necessarily. It's just, I'll give you one story. She decides, we've got a lot of different types of people in our company, but she decides we're going to do, and we did this in sports. She's like, we're going to do a team weight loss. Everybody's going to come in and they're going to get on the scale. And I'm like, no. Michelle fires out this email to the team, like, Michelle, you can't do that. Like we're not going to weigh our employees. And she's like, it'll be fun. It's like, Michelle, you just want me to lose weight. That's what this is about. So, but she's made, all these, are one of our people just like, Susan and Michelle, it might be good for you guys to go to just do some sensitivity, training. And she included me because Michelle would be like, that's not acceptable, Joel, or, yeah. And she's a firecracker and people love her. She's one of those people, she has great energy. She's much more engaging than I am. I mean, she's fantastic. She's actually going to be on TVC in about an hour. Nice. Yeah, but she's much more, she's a firecracker. People love her. Great energy, but she can pop, Yeah. And she's gotten better.
That's funny. Yeah, I think, it's been so interesting looking at, when you think about it from the coaching perspective, and you look at these dynamics over the last, 20, 30 years, where you had, especially like watching, Jordan and the Bulls, and you kind of saw how Phil navigated, then he ends up with the Lakers, and he's doing the same thing with Kobe and Shaq, and like, and like you know, he said in like his books and whatnot is like his job was just to figure out how do I coach everybody because they all had to have something totally different, you know.
Yeah.
And you know, then even modern day, you saw it, you know, just even a couple years ago, you know, with the Warriors, you know, with Durant and Kerr, you know, Draymond. It was just like, so Steve Kerr, that was kind of the thing. You saw like, okay, he seems to be really good at managing these personalities because this looks difficult, at least from the outside, you know.
Well,
That's all.
yeah,
So,
I went to school with Steph Curry's older dad. Her older dad, his dad. He's my age. He went to Virginia Tech.
oh,
So,
nice.
yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine, you know, you literally go to the NBA and that you'd think for a one family that would be enough, you know, and then you end up having multiple kids go. That's just phenomenal.
I can't believe how good he became playing at Davidson and carrying that team to the Final Four, and amazing.
Yeah, no, it was pretty cool. Yeah, I grew up in Sacramento, so I was a huge Kings fan. So I just judge every good NBA player by when the Kings missed them in the draft. Because it's basically like my entire childhood. Like, oh, it could have Karl Malone. Oh, could have, you know, it's like that's, you know, oh, it could have had Steph Curry. So,
Well,
you know, that's sports.
well, and like you and I are talking right now, what's been really interesting for us and very helpful in this male-dominated circle of our industry is Michelle and I have been able to talk. We would go into these Bed Bath & Beyond meetings. We would talk sports the entire time. You know, so coming from the world of sports, being in a male-dominated industry, that has really helped us transition, relate, communicate. That's where we've come from. That's what we've known. Being in sports is a bubble. It is.
Yeah.
It is a really different people. And what I said before, I thought it was going to be like being paid to be on vacation. It wasn't that way at all. I mean, it's 24/7. You're recruiting every weekend. You've got kids on campus every weekend. I think I would have 2 weekends off a year. You know, you're watching film at night, you're going to practice, your individual team meetings, you know, it's a lot of work. And it was a lot of fun, very challenging, but this is very
Well, I
challenging.
imagine that sets you up though into the entrepreneur life because that's usually the shock that people when they try to start their business, they're like, whoa, it never stops, you know, but you were kind of already coming from something that never stopped.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, you know, before we end the interview, I really wanted to get into that. You just kind of mentioned it a little bit, but you know, in the mattress furniture space, I mean, there's literally, you can count the amount of, you know, female CEOs on one hand, you know, and I would love to know from you guys, you know, like, were there any specific challenges to this industry or any really that you kind of came up against? And then, you know, how did you persevere through, or how did you get by it? Or what advice would you give to somebody kind of coming up and maybe dealing with those same obstacles?
It's interesting because I really, Brett, don't have anything to compare it to. I do know that coming from the world of sports, which is a high energy, it's high energy, even brands, you know, Nike and those brands, seeing Lululemon, I mean, they really stand for something. It means something to people, and people like to be associated with those. And then the time that we came in, I mean, it was the home space was kind of boring. You know, it was white space. It was like the retail space was not exciting. And I think there were people out there that were doing some things, but going to market and then seeing what people are doing. Avocado has been a great example. I mean, what a cool brand and what a cool product, and how you tell your story, I think is fantastic. And you know, we saw that as an opportunity to really mix things up. But we saw this industry as being older, as being, you know, just not all that exciting, and wanting that to be. I mean, you know, if you're 30 years old, you've been asleep for 10 years. You know, you need to focus on that, and sleep is so important to recovery for athletes. You know, it's so critical to how you feel the next day. You know, and I think this industry is starting to do a better job of communicating the benefits, the uniqueness of people out there with some really cool things now to address issues. More people are talking about benefits and problem solving than they were when we got into this. I mean, we were the only people that were, you know, we put icons and hang tags and all those things from the sports world, like on our packaging. Almost everybody's doing that now. And, you know, I don't have any other business experience to compare it to, so it's hard for me to answer that question. I still see a lot of white space in this industry for growth, excitement, wellness, and improving people's lives. And I think we have a great opportunity to do that, not just sell products.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I mean, I think that's, your company is a perfect example. Obviously I work at avocado, but you've got purple, there's these different companies that I think saw like, hey, this is so vanilla. It's the same thing for 25 years. Like, oh, it's a promotion. It's the $300. Like, it's the same thing. It's the same memory foam. Oh, we're just going to call it charcoal this month. Next month, it's charcola. But it's the same thing. Oh, it's going to be blue. Now it's yellow. And I think that the customers just got so, just, okay, same thing. That's why the industry was so ripe for people to come in and disrupt it. I mean, if you think of what a Casper was, I mean, and I know the people used to make it, I mean, it was like you did a piece of memory foam on a piece of block foam and you wrapped it in a box. That was it.
Yeah.
Not to downplay it, great concept, but I think they were able to come in because people were just so over the old,
Well, Tempur did a great job of that. I thought they were a disruptor in their commercials and how they demonstrated you could jump on one end of the bed and the wine would move on the other end of the bed, which I thought that was a really cool demonstration.
Yeah.
Looking at Dyson as a vacuum, and who would ever get excited about a vacuum, but I thought Dyson did it in a really cool way. And that's what we're striving to do, as a company, and to continue to grow and bring out cool products that are really unique in the marketplace, but do it in a branded, meaningful way.
Yeah. And tell me about the TV thing, because you started with DirecTV and then you mentioned that, your co-CEO is actually going on QVC. So is that a big part of the business now?
What direct response television did for us, which we didn't want it to look like direct response television, but what it did for us is really just, we've known all the time, number one, when we first got into this, nobody knew they were sleeping hot. There was a level of education that we had to communicate to people. Look, you're probably kicking your leg out in the middle of the night or probably throwing those covers out. And I think and I'm really kind of glad you've got all these other companies out there doing it now, because people are recognizing that most people do sleep hot, and we needed to go on TV to demonstrate our product and communicate. We saw that work with Tempur, we saw that work with Dyson, to communicate how our product is different, what it does, how it works. And we did that. It drove awareness, it drove traffic to our website. And, we have quite a few repeat customers and word of mouth. I mean, one of the things that we found through recent brand studies, we have brand love. People don't like our products. They talk about our products. They're like life-changing talk about our products, which is crazy, and, it's continuing to just communicate that to the rest of the world, how unique the product is and how special. And it may not be for everybody, but it is, I think pretty cool.
Oh, it is really cool. And I think you're right. I think the idea of, a rising tide is going to raise all ships, right? Like, the more people who understand the importance of, not just your mattress, but then what's on top of it is actually the better for companies like yourself and everybody who's kind of in that space. The more people understand the value of, it doesn't make sense for me to go out and buy a $3,000 bed and then go, to Target and buy $30 sheets. Like, that doesn't make any sense, but that's what people did forever. They'd buy that, because I would know, because I used to run these retail stores and they'd be like, well, how come only 30% of our customers or 20% are buying new sheets when they buy a bed? What are they doing? And then apparently it's like, they're either just using their old sheets or they're going and buying inexpensive sheets, and it was like, they just spent all this money. This doesn't make sense. But I think it was the education part, and not understanding that, hey, you spent money on a mattress that has all these materials to help, temperature control and keep you cool. And then you put wool sheets on it or cotton sheets, and you just ruined it, So I think for a company like yourself, that education definitely obviously helps for sure. And I love the idea that you focused around, not looking traditional, right? That's why you have the end caps and the videos and all this cool stuff. I love the branding behind it. It's been great. So last question would just be, what would be, like you said, you have no other experience outside this industry coming back from basketball to this, but as a successful CEO, the growing company, what would be one piece of advice you would give to young entrepreneurs, who are starting out?
I would say to, I would say it's all, number one, you're gonna have to work really, really hard, but it is all about, it's all about surrounding yourself with good people. People will help you. And you don't necessarily, you don't have to pay them. I mean, people really do want to help. And so it's reach out, find experts in the space that you're in. Don't be afraid to ask. Don't see people as competitors, even though they are, but people are willing to help. So, get as much advice as you can. And the other thing is, I talked about empathy earlier. If something isn't working, you have to make a change. If you're not, if you don't have the right people in the right seats, you have to make that change. And I made something, I won't say a lot, but I made some mistakes not doing that. And, hiring friends and, those things really early on. And that's hard. That's a really difficult thing, but get the right people in the right seats.
No, I love that. Yeah. And I think that's from everyone I talk to, who started these big businesses, that seems to be a reoccurring message, because I think early on, that's what you do, right? I know these people, I know, I'm gonna do this, I'll do that. But you don't realize, how quick people can outgrow roles when you're growing fast. And then what do you do? So I think, you either let the person just, get overworked or over their head, or you have to make a decision, change. And those are hard. Those are difficult things, especially if it's a friend or someone you know.
Yeah, it's true. And the other thing, and I think people, you've got to capitalize your business. If you want to grow, you've got to capitalize your business. So get really good at doing those pitches. So that's important too. You need capital to grow.
Well, it sounds like you're gonna need to write a book on how to do it successfully, since every time you pitch somebody, they end up on your board or working for you or some. So whatever you're doing must be really good.
Well, I do have a really, really good team. They're special. We have a today's Thirsty Thursday, we call it. So during work hours, we have a happy hour where we're not allowed to talk about work. And I've really gotten to know people on a more personal level, which that office interaction really didn't get us, was going, we're like a pinball in an office, so we're going, one office to the next, or people are in and out the door. But we've really gotten to know people. It's been fun. It's been funny. I'm really blessed to have the team that I have, because they're just great people, and they're hard workers, and they're passionate about what they're doing in their jobs and the company.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Susan. I love this. I feel like I could go on for I just want to know more about getting from basketball into Sheex. It's blowing my mind. But I do have to ask this question for all the basketball fans out there, right? So being a collegiate coach for all that time. So what is your thought on just paying the players?
I do think it's going to be a nightmare to manage. That's going to become a recruiting prop for people. It's certainly going to separate your big schools with huge fan bases from your smaller schools. But I also see, the checks that we would bring home from the SEC conference, generated from TV, and and the money that schools are making from the athletes' performances, it's a lot of money. That's a big business. And I think they need to think through how they're going to manage it. I just can't. I can't imagine how they're going to do it. Do I think athletes should get some money? Yes, because they don't. So many kids that we were recruiting are first generation college students, and they didn't even know what they were going to do with their lives. They're making a lot of money for the school. They can't even go out and buy things, like clothes and stuff like that. They're not getting any help from home. And they do get a small stipend, but it should be more than that. And if schools are making money on their jerseys and their name, they should get a piece of that.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Susan. Are you going to go to a market in Vegas this summer?
Yeah, we talked about that this morning. We meet with our team every day, and we will be there. Maybe I'll send you a video book.
Yes. No, I will definitely stop by, and we'll definitely do a high five for sure. So thanks so much for coming on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, good to see you again.
Awesome.
Okay.